On December 7th, 1941, just before 8 a.m., Pearl Harbor was devastated. Hundreds of Japanese fighter planes descended onto the U.S. naval base. They managed to destroy and damage nearly 20 American naval vessels, including 8 battleships and over 300 planes and jets. More than 2,400 Americans died in this attack, and many others were also injured and never found. Factors such as the U.S. communication lapses, the entry into the Pacific War, and deep preparation from the Japanese played a major role in the disaster of Pearl Harbor. Earlier in 1941, the U.S. was already in a frenzy, when top-secret documents revealing the U.S.'s war plans were leaked. The person who leaked these documents is still unidentified to this day. On Thursday, December 4th, 1941, the documents were published by a group of isolationist newspapers headed by the Chicago Tribune, which ended with the turmoil of this betrayal being eclipsed by the tragedy of Pearl Harbor. Many Americans became outraged. With a successful Japanese air raid of 6 aircraft carriers and their escorts, 32 vessels in all, they believed it humiliated us by not detecting anything. With all this commotion, there had to be someone to blame. The Roberts Commission stated under the circumstances obtaining at Pearl Harbor between November 27th and December 7th, 1941, it was a deregulation of duty on the part of General Walter Short and Admiral Kimmel not to consult and confer with the other respecting officers the meaning and intent of the warnings sent by the War and Navy Department regarding the danger of war with Japan and the appropriate measures of defense required by the immense of hostiles. The U.S.'s entry into the Pacific War also worsened their relations with the Japanese. Around the beginning of July, America had an essential attack on Japan's economy. The U.S. had frozen their assets and embargoed the sale of oil to Japan. This was punishment for their occupation of southern Indochina. But even with this event, FDR's focus was still on Germany and Hitler. Soon after the attack, Hitler broke his treaty and invaded the Soviet Union, thus making it essential that the U.S. joins before the Soviet gives out and Hitler then gains Britain. Germany then attacks and sinks the destroyers USS Greer, which led to FDR ordering U.S. Navy ships convoying Lend-Lease shipments to Britain to shoot German U-boats on sight in American defense waters west of Iceland. The U.S. then met with Japan, letting them know that the U.S. had B-17s ready to attack major cities and had no regard for civilians in order for the U.S. to not have to fight Germany and Japan at the same time. The U.S. was very hesitant to enter the war. FDR stated that the enemy must strike first for them to enter the war. Then on December 7th, the Japanese attacked, thus forcing the U.S. into war. Not even 4 days later, Germany then also declared war on the U.S. The attacks on Pearl Harbor weren't just out of the ordinary, they were planned. These attacks took much time to prepare for. The attack was originally drawn up around the start of 1941 by Admiral Isoku Yamato. Around the end of August, he revealed his plan to attack several general officers. Then the project was then studied at a naval school in Japan. Pearl Harbor wasn't chosen at random for where to attack. It was chosen specifically. They judged the American fleet as the greatest hurdle standing in the way of the Japanese expansionist initiative, and the majority of American fleet in the South Pacific was stationed at this base. This is important because if U.S. does not become such a global power and become recognized as a threat, they probably don't have the attack aimed towards them. Even with the Japanese getting the first laugh, all it did was awake the sleeping giant. Pearl Harbor is one of the worst attacks on U.S. soil that the U.S. has ever witnessed. With thousands of injuries and deaths and millions of dollars in assets destroyed, we were definitely devastated. With communication lapses, the U.S. entering the Pacific War, and the Japanese being far more prepared than us, they all played major roles in this horrific event. But even with these mistakes and the tragic event, the U.S. was able to survive and prevail.